Hey guys. So, as you could tell by my video title, I was recently released as an Amazon delivery driver. As a result, I decided to go ahead and make this video and share my overall experience working within that position. So, just some caveats before I begin. No, I did not work directly with Amazon. I worked with the DSP of Amazon, DSP meaning Delivery Service Partner for those not familiar with the term, where they were basically an independent delivery company that handled third-party goods, i.e., Amazon packages. Also, that company I worked for most of the time, I fulfilled that position, did not directly fire me either because the warehouse I was stationed at for package loadout had a group of DSPs that were also assigned there, where each group had their own time slot for their loadout. So the team I would later be transferred to would actually be the main arbiter behind my termination. But I'll get to that later. Also, I'm not going to ramble on about the unlawful treatment Amazon can give to their employees like you would hear in the news a lot. Believe me, hearing eyewitness accounts from my own managers and coworkers as well as experiencing this myself, I'm very much aware of how unfairly demanding they can be. But I'm only going to test my firsthand experiences working within my delivery position and nothing else. So with that out of the way, let's get down to it. So shortly before I got hired for the job, I was desperately trying to look for work after I was laid off from my previous job, and was just applying to as many places as I could, and that's when I saw an opening for a delivery driver position my DSP was offering. So from what I can remember about their application process was that I had to upload my resume concerning about my past work experience and answer a couple of logic-based questions about certain delivery scenarios, such as how would you deliver at this work site, or how would you gain access to these apartments if they were locked, from an assessment I had to take in the end. It was just mostly arithmetic and hypothetical-based questions they asked, and I would just answer using the multiple choice field they offered, where I would try and pick the best option. I didn't really understand the point of that assessment since we would be trained later over these same scenarios when we got hired, but yeah, needless to say, the recruiter would call me up a few days later and ended up hiring me right at the end of the interview I had with her. I was like, "Oh, cool! I finally got a job. That's nice." So right within my first day of training, we basically had to do like 2 modules of learning material relevant to our driving position. We went over things like traffic safety, how to deliver packages, the shipping process concerning said packages, as well as some of the scenarios I listed off when I took that interview assessment. And by the end of each module, we had to take a test and needed to get at least, I believe, 70% to pass. So yeah, really long and boring. It took most of us at least 6 hours to complete, I think. But luckily, I passed. So on day 2 of training, it was way shorter since it was basically our driving test. And what they did is that they scheduled each recruit to show up on certain times for the driving test. And we basically had to ride in this big white Ram ProMaster vehicle, which would become a staple for the vehicles we had to drive as provided by our DSP, and I think is what the Prime vans drive as well. So we basically had to drive around the block, drive out in the city streets, as well as take the interstate. We were testing how well we responded to two-way and four-way stop signs and stoplights, how fast we were going, and if we were paying attention to our blind spots, as well as the covering distance between each vehicle in front and behind us. So basically the assessment you get if you're trying to attain your driver's license, but driving a bigger vehicle. So yeah, I would pass that test and I would show up to work the following week later. So the first day at work, I was greeted by my managers, all of them really nice people that had a passion for expanding their business over where I was staying at. This was only a contractual based job I was doing, by the way, so these guys were able to rent up a spot at our station for a few months before Amazon Logistics would decide that they were valuable enough to give them a permanent stay. And my managers were working every day to try to make that work. So yeah, really cool, really hardworking people I was dealing with that had a couple of years experience of being a delivery driver as well, and were just very supportive throughout my months with them. I'm just very grateful to be working alongside them. So when I first met them, they had me sign a couple of forms, like one was concerning payment information, like if I wanted direct deposit or physical checks, and a lunch waiver form. And after that, they gave me my uniform, my badge, and my safety vest, and had me purchase the composite shoes I would be wearing throughout my shifts, from Zappos, which was an online retail platform where employees affiliated with Amazon can purchase their goods with Amazon credit. So after I was able to get all my stuff, I was partnering up with a few coworkers that had trained me very well for a few days about how we loaded up, how we delivered packages through the Flex app that we use, the do's and don'ts of driving a delivery vehicle, how we did our inspections, and we're also kind of to give me some advice on how they sort the packages for quicker delivery time. So yeah, no complaints from my coworkers as well, all awesome people. So to kind of break down the steps that we had to follow during our shifts, we go to our post where our company is stationed, and they provided us with an itinerary sheet where it lists off all the packages we had to deliver, from the small, lighter ones that were stored in bags we had to place in our vans, as well as the bigger, heavy ones we had to separate since the bags couldn't accommodate them. We called those overflow. And the quantity of how many packages we had to deliver can vary from as little as 100 to as much as 300. And they expected us to deliver those packages regardless of whether or not how far we had to travel. Sometimes it could be a simple short route where the stops were spread far apart across the region we had to deliver in order to extend our shift. They would call those nursery routes, and they would typically be assigned to new workers. And sometimes we had up to 300 and almost 300 packages, and we had to travel as far as an hour away to our delivery destination. And this would be standard routes for employees that have been there longer than a week. So yeah, depending on the time and day, our itinerary can be quite loaded sometimes, but thankfully, if we ever fell behind due to either the excessive load we were carrying, or just external events that were happening that slowed our progress, like traffic or accidents, then management would be kind enough to call up someone close by that finished the route early and help rescue us so we can finish before the 12-hour mark hit, because Amazon made it a policy to let us not work any longer than that. So yeah, I'm sorry I'm going on a tangent here. We would get our itinerary sheet once we walked in, and also get a pouch that contained the keys to the delivery van, a battery pack, a gas card, and the work phone, so we can use them for the Flex app. And these phones, at least the ones they purchased for us, were just garbage. It basically only held like 4 gigabytes of RAM. It was just honestly so slow when we were using it to deliver packages. And yeah, I had to make sure to optimize and shut down all the background apps off from those phones, as well as adjust the brightness screen, because otherwise its performance will be affected and its battery life will drain very quickly if not studious enough on its lifespan. So yeah, garbage phones, but that was all they can afford since they were cheap, so we had to work with what we got. So after we got our stuff, our managers would do a little prep meeting telling us to work hard and be careful, especially if there's going to be bad weather later, since we had our contract held during most of the winter season. And anyone that's had to deliver during winter season knows how dreadful that experience can be. So after the meeting, we would go to our vans parked by the warehouse, and the company that we worked for had rented us 3 types of vans. One was the Ram ProMaster that I'd used for my driving test. Those were really nice vans to drive in. It had a nice radio display where it would offer different radio modes like FM, AM, as well as Sirius, and it was even Bluetooth compatible, so you can connect your phone to these vehicles and listen to the music or podcast you want, as long as you kept the volume low enough to not get any customer complaints. It also offered some neat side view mirror controls for both the upper and lower layer that usually came with cargo vans. Also had a convenient rear camera monitor where it had these dynamic green borders on the center edges that moved every time. I hit my mic there, sorry. That moved every time you turn the steering wheel to indicate the pathway your vehicle was going to reverse into. So yeah, very convenient vehicles to drive in. The only problem it had though is that in the cargo area, it never really had any shelves or security features like buckles or straps that we had seen with the Prime vans during our trainings. So let me show you some images to make you know what I mean. So I'm just going to go ahead and offer some comparisons between the cargo interior of the Prime van and the regular vans we drove. Okay, I'm going to shorten my webcam a little bit. All right, so first up is the Amazon Prime van. And this is what the cargo interior of the Prime van looked like. Oh yeah, and by the way, this is an interior image of the new Rivian vehicle they had recently distributed. So so these are all like modernized features. Like I couldn't get any other images of other Prime vans out there, and I do apologize about that. But this is the best I can get. And yeah, a lot of these features are modernized, like these two shelves right here. And for other Prime vans, they only have like one shelves. So yeah, some of these features that might not be included in the other Prime vans that other couriers are driving. So yeah, again, I do apologize. But if you want to look, but if you're really curious on what the other Prime vans look like, you're probably gonna have to dig a little deeper than I did when finding these images. But yeah, you can kind of get the point of what these Prime vans contain. They had the shelves on either side, one for the bags and the other for the overflow. You have like some straps in the back right here, I believe. And you also have this dolly right here, which we also had a dolly as well within our vehicles sometimes, and sometimes we don't, but we never really had those other features. So in comparison, or in contrast, I should say, hold on, let me pull this up in my window capture. This is what the Ram ProMaster looked like, the van that we drove in. Just this big empty space right here. So you can just imagine when we were loading up our vehicles, bags on one side and overflow on the other, you can just imagine how easily they shifted all over the place. And some of the overflow I delivered, at least I experienced this with some of the exterior box portions of it, because I never really bothered to check inside to see if the items were okay, but I never really had any customer complaints concerning them, so I'm assuming they're fine. But yeah, some of the box portions of the overflow would get damaged because of the slight shift in gravity my vehicle would take, like if I'm turning or stopping. So yeah, no security features concerning the vans we drove compared to the Prime vans. So if anyone out there is ordering something big or heavy from Amazon, hold on, let me get myself full screen really quick. Here we go. So if anyone out there is ordering something big or heavy from Amazon, take it from me. I highly recommend you also purchase a protection plan along with your item purchase, because they don't offer rentals the same features like they do with their Prime vans. So who knows what might happen. So just a bit of a forewarning there. The other type of vehicles we had driven were these Ford Transit Penske branded vans, which then offers many features as the ProMaster, but they were okay. And the budget branded ones, which I absolutely hated. Like when you left it on park mode for like 5 minutes, it would just automatically shut off and you have to turn on the ignition in order to get it going again. And when you were reversing, my God, it was so slow. You want to go any faster than like 5 miles per hour, like just that slow. And especially for a demanding job like we had. And they had these like low hanging roofs, which were the worst of all. These low hanging roofs in the back where if you're 180 centimeters or over, I'm 5'11", so I'm just that high. You were constantly banging your head on the top of the roof when you were entering the cargo area to get the packages. Oh, I hate those vehicles, don't I, Mike? So yeah, those were the vehicles we drove in. So once we got in our vans, we had to do our pre-trip inspections on our phone. So there are 2 inspections that we had to do during our shift, our pre-trip and our post-trip. And it's just how they sound. You do your pre-trip inspections before you drive the van assigned to you, and you do your post-trip inspections after you're done driving. So how these inspections are designed in the phone is that it goes through multiple sections representing different sizes of the van, like the front, back, etc. And they would format each section with some subsections representing the different vehicle parts on that side of the van. And we have to input responses through the use of checkboxes. Like if we were to analyze the tires, the mirrors, the lights, and the front of the van, we would have to input whether or not each of those parts were damaged. Except, and this is the ironic part, we aren't really supposed to input anything. Like while I was getting trained during my first day at the warehouse, the trainer notified to all of us to not bother checking any of the boxes because our vehicle would get grounded and we have to get home early with a lower paycheck, and this applied to all the DSPs working there, not just us. But in contrast to those expectations, Amazon wanted us to not rush through the vehicle inspections in an effort to look like we were actually noticing what was wrong with the vehicles. So we were expected to go through the inspections for at least 2 minutes, but still not check anything. It's weird how DSPs were able to get around that, but they somehow made it work because we never got a single complaint from Amazon. So after we did our vehicle inspections, we would wait for a couple minutes until it was time for us to line up with our loadout. And we had a lot of employees working on our team, so in order to accommodate the size of our team through the loadout, they would split us up in 2 waves. The first wave would line up 20 minutes earlier than the second wave, and we'd get the loadout done as soon as the second wave would follow in succession to get their loadout ready. So how the loading process worked was we would line up in the loading zone within the warehouse, and we would wait until all the vehicles would line up, and someone on the megaphone would give us the all clear signal. We would then take our phones and go to our proper staging areas listed in our Flex app and scan the carts that contain our packages. We would then take them all the way back to our vehicles and load them up with the help of our itinerary sheet. So our itinerary sheet basically had like a list of bags in overflow in sequential order that we had to deliver. And how we organized it was that since we didn't have any shelves, we would take the second bag that was queued for delivery and load that up, and then stack the first bag on top of it. So the layout we had was even number bags on the bottom and odd number bags on top. For the overflow, we just followed the tag markers that were placed on them and sort them based on where they were within our itinerary sheet. Like if we had an overflow that had an E3E tag listed at the bottom, then we would take that to the very back of our vehicle. But if we had a tag that said something like 2B that was listed on the top of the sheet, then we would place that in front. So depending on the number of packages we had to work with, how quickly the receivers were loading up our carts, and how far we had to travel to our staging areas, and trust me, there were some shitty days, pardon my language, where we'd have to literally walk all the way to the other side of the warehouse to get our carts. The loadout process would either be very quick and efficient or just a massive struggle. And we were only given 15 minutes to complete our loadout, and if you weren't finished by that time, you had to park your vehicle outside away from the garage doors so that other vehicles can get through and finish your loadout there. Luckily, we had quite a bit of willing team members ready to help out when they got done early, as well as our managers, so others would be finished before the 15-minute timer was up, myself included. So that's always convenient. So after our loadout, we go to our delivery destinations, deliver the packages to either the homes, apartments, and sometimes commercial businesses that our Flex app assigns us to deliver to. Yeah, the Flex app makes it very convenient for us on utilizing various delivery methods. It can offer simple front door delivery that's either preset to us in the app or customized through the recipient's notes. It also offers rear porch options, as well as side porch, signatures, garage deliveries, even where that's cool in and of itself, because if a customer wants a garage delivery done, then our phone is able to connect to their garage sensors once we get close enough, and we'll just command it to open to have us put the package inside and have us close it once we do. Yeah, and it also has this very cool feature called One Key Access that's sometimes shown to us for electronically locked apartment complexes, where our phone sends electronic command to unlock those doors for us. So those are all pretty neat features to have. And some other convenient components it has is that we can go to the options menu on our phone, and actually has preset reasons to why we can't deliver the packages, whether it's because of bad weather, a closed business, a loose dog even, and a person no-showing for a password-based delivery, which was a pain in the butt in and of itself because you have to wait for them to answer and hoping they answer with a password already prepped, but that mostly doesn't happen, either because they forget and have to look it up, or it's a family member that answers and has to call on their kindred that actually ordered the package and relay the password to them. So yeah, a lot of time wasted there. Absolutely hate password-based deliveries. I wish they never existed. Oh, sorry for that little rant. I just need to get that off my chest. I hope you understand. So yeah, to sum up, we go to our stop, park on either the side of the road or on the driveway if the navigation system allows us to do so. In that case, we have to reverse into the lot, scan the packages that match the tag number displayed on the phone, take them to the assigned location, take our picture, or sign a signature depending on the preferred delivery method, and then drive to the next stop area. We just rinse and repeat for the next 100 or so stops, depending on how much the itinerary gives us. And after we get done with our itinerary, we head back to the gas station nearest our warehouse to fill up the vehicles with gas from a gas card they give us through that they pay through with their credit. And afterwards, we head back to the station, turn in our empty bags and our leftover packages that we didn't deliver, and do our post-trip inspection, which is formatted the same as our pre-trip and that I explained earlier, and turn in our work items, and then clock out and head home for the day. That's the quotidian experience of being an Amazon delivery driver. So, in regards to our schedule, and this is what I find the main highlight about this job, it's not intentionally a set schedule that we have control over, but our payroll manager, who also manages our schedule, is able to keep it fixed for us. And that's super convenient for me because I don't have to worry about the schedule overlapping with my personal routines, such as grocery shopping or hospital appointments. And best part is that we work 10 hours a day for 4 days a week, which is a schedule that I've always preferred because it just gives me the perfect work-life balance. There are times, however, since this was a winter season contract, that we had to work 5 days a week due to what our managers termed peak season, because it refers to the time within the season that customer deliveries are in high demand during Christmas and New Year's. It's a bit of a strain in labor work, but then again, I also gym regularly, so I guess I feel the fatigue more than most of my other coworkers. But yeah, luckily that only lasts for about a month before we go back to our normal schedule, so that's nice. So yeah, the winter season. Honestly, what I hated the most about this job. And like I mentioned before, everyone hates delivering on that season. For one, it gets dark early. So we're just going from stop to stop, struggling to find the house numbers as early as 5 p.m. Sometimes the recipients are kind enough to leave their porch lights on that contain the numbers, and sometimes they don't. So we have to watch our step, especially when there's ice in the driveway, which, depending on the circumstance, can be hard to anticipate when you're also focused on not dropping the overflow and our abundance of packages you're carrying for these stops. Luckily, our workplace offers these traction plates for our shoes, where the spikes at the bottom can be used to grip on the ice and reduce the risk of slipping. So yeah, as you might tell with the ice, it's also a pain in the butt to drive on, as we had to drive very slowly, and these were FWD vehicles we were driving. So yeah, they were very crap in driving through ice and snow, and depending on how a customer's driveway is, we have to observe whether or not the driveway is traversable for package delivery. If so, we can take the chance, but if not, we have to call the customer twice and text them once and ask them if they want us to either meet us down at the end or have we place the package somewhere to have them pick up later. If they don't answer, we'll just have to mark the package as undeliverable on our phone and take it back to the station, which as a consequence can affect our scorecard, which I'll get to later. But yeah, driving and delivering on snow sucks, and there are times where I even underestimated a customer's driver and how slick they were and ended up getting stuck myself. They do offer us traction boards, which in my experience aren't very good. And my managers did tell me that if I got stuck, I can turn the electronic stability controls off, which will give you more engine power to get out of the slick ordeal. But sometimes that doesn't even work, and the only option I have left is for our managers to be dispatched to our current location and use their trucks to haul us out of the snow. Problem was, most of my delivery locations were about an hour away. So you can tell how much time was wasted for my managers to come down there so they can get me out, and depending on how late in the night it was, which has happened to me, I had to rush back to the station, not getting gas, and not complete my full route, which would hurt my scorecard even more. So I feel like this is a good segue to talk about Amazon's scorecard and its criteria. So the scorecard that my DSP would display to us on the board within our posts would measure certain metrics for each employee that's given either a percentage value or a numeric value. The metrics my DSP would analyze for all of us were our DCR, which stands for delivery completion rate, that measured it for delivering all our packages in a timely manner, our POD, which stands for photo on delivery, that measured the quality of our photos, our DSB, which stands for delivery success behavior, that measured our compliance with delivery procedures, and our CDF, which stands for customer delivery feedback, and that measured the customer responses based on our services provided. Yeah, and those were the only metrics my DSP would analyze. It didn't really bother whether or not we're following safety protocols like other DSPs would, such as wearing our seatbelts, not speeding, not getting distracted, and whether we're keeping our distance from other vehicles, because we were only driving rentals and not Amazon branded vehicles that had camera monitors that would keep track of all that. So based on those metrics, our scorecard would give us an overall rating based on how well we did within those metrics on average. So I believe the ratings in ascending order were poor, fair, good, great, and fantastic. If you averaged a 95% or above on your scorecard, then you were within the fantastic range. If you were below 95% but above 90, then you were considered great. Below 90% but still within that 5% below max deviation, you were considered good, so on and so forth. And I mostly just counted the baseline measurement. I'm not counting any negative responses or incidents that also affect your rating. I'm just trying to keep that simple. So yeah, I worked really hard to fall within the fantastic range, being the perfectionist I am, and I did for the most part. And there were a few days when my score would drop to good or great, but that was mostly because of severe weather issues. Again, our contract mostly took place in the winter, and as you can imagine, we would get blizzards sometimes. And if the weather was still bad enough by 5 p.m., because that's when it usually gets dark, and the forecast shows that conditions won't improve anytime soon, then we would be ordered to head back to the station early and not finish our route, bringing back an abundant load of packages, which would drop our DCR. It sucks that Amazon counts external events beyond our control against our scorecard, but that's just how they operate. Also, I remember a time I got into a minor collision that was caused by some other driver, and I had to wait at that accident location until I can get a police report so I could follow that to my managers for insurance purposes. Problem was, police never came after waiting for at least 4 hours. The area I was delivering to was notorious for having a mostly unresponsive police dispatch unit, so my managers just finally told me and said, well, we'll take care of it tomorrow. Just do what you can with your route and head back to the station. And that also led to a bunch of packages being returned to the station, also dropping my DCR. But those were the only times I can remember when my score dropped below fantastic. Otherwise, I did pretty well. In regards to the benefits my DSP was offering, since this was originally supposed to be temporary work they were doing for only 3 months, they didn't really have any benefits ready for employees. It wasn't until 3 months in where logistics would then allow them access to our benefits after deciding to extend their contract for another 2 months. Since the new year was just beginning, we were offered a very limited amount of time to roll in those benefits. I think it was around like a month after the new year began. So we had to sign up quickly. The benefits they offered were pretty good though. They had a good amount of options to choose from, such as a basic health plan, dental insurance, visual insurance, life insurance, as well as supplemental health insurance, and our 401k, and basically what you can expect from a healthy functioning work site. So yeah, the benefits were very promising from our DSP. I can't complain about them. So after our contract extension, things were starting to look up for our team. Our work roster was pretty solid. We were hiring plenty of people, and most of them were doing fantastic until we got a call from logistics. Management had notified us through a work app we were using for communication purposes that Amazon decided to cut the cord with them. As you can tell, they were pretty heartbroken. So were we. After all the hard work they had put out every day to make this work, we were building a solid foundation within our base, and it all just implodes from that one call. Their reason? Our main regional manager was not showing up enough. That was it. That was all I heard. She had to take care of her sick child, and she was absent a lot because of it, and Amazon decided to let her team disband because she wasn't putting in enough work effort. A bit of an absurd reason to let them go, and there might have been more to it than what I've heard, but as I stated before, I'm only giving my experiences on how Amazon operates. So after the notice, we were offered some transfer options for the other DSPs at the warehouse. One of my managers told me that I can go to either two teams. One was to a new team that was coming over to take a placement in our current team's post once I left. The other was to a more grounded DSP that had worked at the warehouse for a couple of years and were able to utilize Amazon branded vehicles as a mode of delivery due to being more established. Since I was mostly doing fantastic as a delivery driver, I decided to go ahead and work for the more renowned team at the warehouse, and boy, would that come to bite me later. So on my DSP's last day at the station, our managers went ahead and organized an invitation for all the employees to go bowling after work to commemorate our time together. I decided to go as well, and a few other employees, and my managers, of course. We bowled, we drank, and we talked about various subjects. And one of the subjects we talked about was what teams we were transitioning to. My coworkers had mentioned various DSPs they were going to that my manager didn't list off when I talked to him. And when they mentioned about the DSP I was transferring to, they did not have any positive responses to them. Because rumors have been relayed to my coworkers about how terrible they were, how terrible management was, and how much pressure they put you on since they've been there longer. The overall attitude they showed to the team I was going to work with just washed away a lot of the anticipation I had in transferring to them. It didn't wipe it away completely because I had a sliver of hope that these guys were just hyperbolizing about their reputation. These were just rumors they heard, and rumors often undermine a lot of the actual experience we witness. Were they right about these rumors? Well, let's just go ahead and get down to what my actual experience was with the team that would later fire me. So on the day that I was interviewed by the recruiter, by the way, very nice person, no complaints about her whatsoever, she told me that my former manager had nothing but a positive reception about me. I was a hard worker and a good team player, and decided to hire me on the spot. Cool. She also told me that the low quantity they usually handle is no different than the quantity I handled for my previous team. The only difference was that their team would be driving the Amazon branded vehicles for the most part, and were mostly focused on routes that were more in proximity to our station. So instead of traveling to a delivery route that was an hour away, we're only traveling as far as 30 to 40 minutes away from the station to a delivery route. So this sounds all nice and convenient, right? Well, when she went over the schedule for this team, she stated that it wasn't set on certain days of the week, like my previous team had implemented. Like I could be working 4 days in a row for 1 week, but when the new week schedule came out, I could be working an extra 4 days afterwards, so it was completely arbitrary. She also stated that in regards to benefits, they did offer enrollment plans from insurance providers, but they didn't offer any 401k providers to contribute to. So if I was ever to receive any contributions from this new team I was settling into, then I basically had to roll over all my retirement funds from my previous employer's provider over to an IRA. These little inconveniences were a bit annoying to get used to, especially compared to how my previous DSP operated, but not too concerning as I saw these as just simple adjustments I needed to make. So after the interview process was done, I made a request to her saying if I could get trained on driving the Amazon vehicles I was going to use, because I've never driven those vehicles, haven't taken a training course in about 6 months, and needed a bit of a refresher of what I'm going to expect, especially with the Netron cameras installed. She said, yeah, sure, let me talk to my boss and see what we can do for you. I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So my first day with the other team, I was greeted by the managers there, and I had to fill out the same forms that I had to do with my first team, the payment and lunch waiver forms. I was then introduced to my coworkers, and one of the dispatchers working there that gave us our itinerary told me, hey, our manager said that you needed some training, so I'm going to let you drive a box truck with another worker of ours. And I was just thinking, box truck? I requested to train in the Amazon vehicles, but okay. Because hands-on training usually lasts about a few days when I first started, so maybe it was just because the manager wanted me to get used to the other vehicle they also had to drive. I don't know. I just acquiesced to the assignment given to me because I assumed that's what the manager's intention was. So I went ahead got trained in the box truck we were driving. It was one of those big budget branded box trucks with a deceptively large cargo box area. And since the back was separately attached from the front, we had to access our packages by getting out and going all the way to the back of the vehicle, unlatching the sliding doors that kept it secured, open it, get out our packages we had to deliver, and then shut the doors and latch it again. This vehicle was a huge pain to drive in because of it. That, and had this protruding rear cargo step in the back that you couldn't retract, and it would just scrape the ground each time we went into a slope that was no harder than like 20 degrees above ground level. So yeah, awful vehicle driving, just awful. Luckily, my coworker had a bit of a trick to access our packages quicker by taking each and every package out of one bag and just splaying them around within the cabin area. Still took some time to organize, especially when I was riding along with them due to the limited space. But yeah, still a more convenient option than getting them out the traditional way. And oh yeah, the phones we were given too were somehow worse than the phones we had from my first team performance-wise. It was these black Sonim phones we had to use, and I kid you not, if you even left the audio on while using the Flex app, it would just get overwhelmed and automatically shut off, and we had to reboot it every time it blacks out. So yeah, the phones were a huge pain to use, and we had to be very vigilant to only leaving the app running and nothing else. Otherwise it would shut off. So the next day after my training, I went and got my itinerary sheet from my pouch that contained all my other work paraphernalia. I looked at my sheet, and was this the day I could actually be trained on the Amazon van? Nope. I was driving the box van again, this time on my own, after only one day of training, and only driving it during the last half of my shift with my trainer the day before. I don't know about you, but does that seem like enough time to try to accommodate yourself to all the features as well as the size and mechanics of a vehicle you've only driven for like 4 to 5 hours? To me, I don't think it was. And I couldn't believe the quantity they expected me to deliver that day either. Over 300 packages, with up to 180 stops, with at least a third of them being apartments. And anyone who's delivered apartments know how taxing that experience can be. On the bright side, I only had to travel 10 minutes away from the station to my delivery route, but keep in mind, I had to complete that route in a box truck. So yeah, that day was so demanding, I couldn't even deliver all the packages. I had to get rescued that day. But a major factor in why I was rescued was that I was involved in an incident that this time I was responsible for. I had to deliver to an apartment complex where it had this awning at the entrance that led to the parking lot. And since I had to deliver to the other side of that lot, I decided to go ahead and drive through the entrance. I thought the awning was tall enough for my vehicle to have clearance and go through. Boy, was I wrong. Right above the awnings, they had these fire sprinklers that I didn't notice, and right when I went through the awning, I heard a scraping noise on the roof of my cargo box and heard water spraying out everywhere. I looked at my driver's side window and noticed the little streams and droplets accumulating on there. And when I saw those droplets, I literally shouted, "Oh no," and immediately backed up to see what the issue was. The roof of my cargo box had destroyed one of the fire sprinklers on the awning. Apparently that roof was a lot taller than what I had anticipated. Stood at least a foot taller than my cabin. I'll admit, I should have taken precaution, but the constant rush I was feeling due to the high workload I had and only having a day of training over the vehicle I was driving, I felt like I didn't have enough time to be able to get accustomed to that vehicle. So that sprinkler I broke was going off like crazy, fire alarms were going off, tenants were coming out, checking what was going on, fire department came. It was a very embarrassing time for me. But fortunately, I managed to stay calm throughout the whole ordeal. I called my station about the incident, followed procedure, and was able to trade insurance information with the landlord there. And I was apologizing profusely to him about what happened. But luckily, he was cool about the whole thing, told me it was just a minor fix. I phoned in driver support to file a report on the incident, relayed the file number back to my station, and was able to finish my shift with no further instances. So the next day, I looked at my itinerary, and guess what? I actually had the opportunity to drive the Amazon vans this time. Unfortunately, they didn't offer me a trainer, even though I specifically requested to receive hands-on training with the vans since I'd never driven them before. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been 6 months since I took the training course and went over all the unique features the vans possessed. I needed that refresher, and sadly, they didn't give it to me. I talked to one of the dispatchers that communicates with my manager about this, and they just said, oh, it's not that bad. You just have to get used to the cameras. That's exactly what I was worried about. I adamantly told him if they can relate to the manager about my request for hands-on training, and they did that, but the manager just shrugged off my request. I was like, oh, great. I guess I'm going into this with only vague familiarity of how the vehicle operated. Luckily, one of my coworkers was kind enough to come up to me and help relieve my worries and tell me that he's new to this too, and was also kind enough to help me find my vehicle because the key remote we had didn't have an alarm option that made our horns honk, which was what we used to help find our assigned vehicles in the lot. It only had a lock and unlock option, and we had to pay attention to the signal lights that were flashing instead. When I finally found my vehicle and went inside it, I noticed it had all the standard features of an Amazon vehicle, from its shells to camera monitors, and I also noticed how incredibly old school this van was. It didn't have side mirror adjusters, it only had standard FM AM radio, so no serious Bluetooth options, and it didn't even have cruise control. That's how old school it was. As you can tell, most of these old school vans are prone to overuse and lots of mileage, so they control like a piece of crap. And it had this handbrake that I didn't release, which caused my vehicle to rattle, squeak like crazy, and go very slow because I never noticed it. It was never trained on it, since I'm more used to using the hydraulic brakes on all the other vehicles I've driven. And I literally had to have my manager point that out to me while I was doing loadout. I especially had a hard time with loadout because I had to stock up to 30 to 40 overflows in my vehicle that I knew how to sort, but didn't know how to organize. The bags weren't an issue, it was just the overflow that was a pain in the butt to load up. Once I finally got done with loadout and was going to my delivery route, one of the streets I took, I ran into a red light. I was about 100 feet from the intersection and thought I had enough time to pass it when it turned yellow. But I severely underestimated how quickly the light turned red before I passed it. I could have still had enough time to be below the white line when it turned red if I braked hard enough, but that would cause all my overflow to fall out everywhere within my storage compartment. So my thought cage wanted to avoid that and just decided to go ahead and pass through the red light because I know there was a second delay between the timings of the color switches within the intersections. Like the other lane would literally have a green light a second after our lane turned red. When you drive for plenty of years like I do, you start to notice some of the technical nuances concerning certain road features like traffic lights. Did I know this van would penalize me if I did that? Yes, I did. I didn't know how severe that ramification would be once I did that. Because after delivering to about 2 or 3 stops, my phone notified me to call dispatch and head back to the station because it suspended my account. I was just staring at my phone dumbfounded, going, what the heck is going on? I called dispatch, and they told me that the camera saw that I ran a red light, which I initially thought counted as 1 traffic violation, added up to 10 violations, and I was suspended as a delivery driver until I took a safety refresher course. Of course, this was a very devastating time for me. It would precipitate a lot of anxiety because I didn't know when my manager was going to upload that course for me to re-enable my Flex account. One of the dispatchers said it could take up to a day, but I've also heard online that some workers also going through suspension issues didn't receive it for up to a week. But luckily, I was able to get the course linked to me the following day or two. Right when I got it, I went ahead and took it. Very short course, only took about 15 minutes to complete. I informed my managers that I had completed the course and all I had to do was play the waiting game. Next few days would pass, and I would finally get a call from one of my managers, and they broke the news to me that because I also had that incident earlier with the sprinkler that I had talked about earlier, with the appended red light violation, or violations, however you want to interpret it, they decided to go ahead and terminate me. So yeah, that basically sums up my whole stay within that company. I do have quite a bit of thoughts about this. Like, if you're going to offer me the time and opportunity to try to rectify the mistakes I made by having me take that course, why bother deciding to just go ahead and fire me anyways? Best of yet, why even bother giving me that course in the first place if you're just going to let me go? As you can see, there was a lot of communication issues I had within that company. Like, where was the training I requested for with the prime bands? Why only give me 1 day of training for another vehicle I'd never driven and I'm still trying to get used to? Also, I want to show you guys something my manager sent me a few days after my firing. Despite me letting me go, he went ahead and uploaded my scorecard. Oh, I still have my Ram Pro. Sorry, good job. Okay, let's go ahead and show my scorecard here. There we go. So as you can see here, these are the metrics that my scorecard goes over. The metric names being on the left and my score being on the right. It measured whether I was following safety compliance, which included my speeding, my seatbelt, my distraction rates, as well as whether I was following vehicles next to me within a safe distance. And also, this is what my other DSP measured, which is my customer delivery feedback, customer escalation, delivery completion rate, delivery success behaviors, POD, which I mentioned earlier, stands for photo on delivery, and delivery success behaviors, DNR. DNR meaning delivery not received, which tracks customer complaints on their packages not being received despite being confirmed delivered by delivery drivers. So yeah, all of these in the green except for sign signal violation rate, which is from the stoplight I passed, and the lack of deliveries up here that I made, which I guess is from the dispatcher that took over my route after my account got suspended. So yeah, my manager showed me this a few days after my firing. It was like, why show me this if you've already let me go? Like, I don't get it. Yeah, I just want to show this off just to try to emphasize how terrible their communication infrastructure was. Like, ugh, just awful. So, okay, let me just go ahead and full screen right here. Before I continue, here we go. I'll go ahead and get rid of that in the capture there. I'll show the borders. So, if anyone here ever plans to work for Amazon or at least a DSP of Amazon, my advice to you is please look up more information about the company before deciding on joining. Look up the ratings, look up the reviews, whether it's within a local area that Amazon operates or just about the DSP itself, and decide whether or not if you still want to apply with them despite their complications. Because I feel like my biggest failure was that I didn't pry enough to understand what I was getting myself into. I didn't know there were other options available that I could have chosen, but were never mentioned to me, and I didn't know how bad the reputation was within the company I was working for. So yeah, do your research, because the overall work environment within Amazon and its DSPs, at least from my experience, is all going to be dependent on which team or local branch you're going to be joining. The first team I joined was awesome, while the second team, not so much. So for anyone that's made it to the end here, I thank you for taking the time to watch me. I hope it was insightful enough to understand how Amazon operates their delivery businesses. And if you ever decide to be a part of an Amazon team, just remember to do your research, and best of luck on your journey. Have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.